All right, folks, let's go ahead and let's jump into it a bit. Starting just a little bit late because I just running a little bit behind today. My daughter woke up at 12:30 at night, so I stayed up with her. Then my son woke up in the middle of the night because we woke him up, and so we had a little bit of a party in the middle of the night. So I didn't get to sleep till like 5 a.m. Actually, after that, like closer to 6. So I hope you guys are having a great day. I know I am having a pretty good day. What are we going to start with? I don't know. I found out about this YouTube genre called mukbang, which I guess originates in Korea. It's just people binge eating huge amounts of food in front of a camera. And sometimes they're like, like the microphone, like real close. And you hear like all the gross eating noises. And I'm like, there's these Korean girls who have like 6 million subscribers because they just gorge themselves in front of a camera. Like that's the entire thing. Sorry, I'm adjusting my lighting setup's a little bit wonky here today. Forgot I moved a little bit. There we go. A little better. So yeah, that was always kind of weird. Apparently there's some kind of special hardcover edition of The Name of the Wind where the edge of the pages are crimson red. Well, that's not that special. I mean, you get Bibles with gilded pages. You just you paint that. Ooh. I don't know why anyone would get a special edition of Name of the Wind, like a bad book that no one will talk about in 30 years. People will talk about it like, oh yeah, there was this guy who put out 2 books and never put out the 3rd because he had no idea what he was doing. And everybody liked it in like 2007, 2008 or something, and then everyone forgot about it. And he spent all his time playing Dungeons and Dragons online with people. So, like, I just don't see, YouTube, it's the fact that like there's mukbang as a genre on YouTube is just, it's really hilarious, but that's what it is. That's the way old YouTube was. It's just crazy crap, It's like, here's a channel that's just all about flat earth, and here's a channel that's all about eating top ramen, and here's a channel that's all about, whatever. So that's kind of funny. I was thinking there should be like make up another genre instead of mukbang, like mini muck, where instead of gorging yourself on top ramen and slurping it, you eat healthy food in the proper proportions. Like this could be a channel if you're really fit, especially if you're a woman, if you're like a fitness enthusiast woman or a bodybuilder and you look good, just like put on a sports bra, turn on the camera, and then get like a big portion of healthy food, because healthy food's actually, like I ate a wrap. I've had like a wrap recipe I've had on the channel. It's like giant taco, basically. It's like eat that in front of the camera and let people have that. And then it's like, bam, that's a 400 calorie meal, and let people see that instead of dudes like ballooning up to 400 pounds, doing mukbang videos of eating like 7 different fast food meals in one sitting. And then like a giant plate of ramen that they slurp up. It's disgusting. Like, and frankly, like, I agree with you, Waylon. It's disgusting. And what makes it extra disgusting, like gluttony is one of the 7 deadly sins. Like, it's a celebration of gluttony, and it's kind of pornographic in that sense, in that, people watch pornography for many reasons, but part of it is that you're watching somebody else engage in acts that you don't do yourself. So it's kind of, gluttony by proxy, that you are watching somebody do things that you wouldn't do yourself for whatever stimulative reasons, right? So that's an interesting thing. Maybe you fantasize about eating huge amounts of food, or it's very satisfying to watch somebody eat, like gorge themselves and binge eat. It's not good for you though. So that would be the opposite. You do the mini muck, where it's like, here's healthy food in the proper proportions, and I eat it and look good on the camera. Rather than, promoting gluttony. I'm trying to think what that would be. It'd be like, instead of watching pornography, it's like women in pretty dresses or something. I don't know. I don't know what the opposite would be. People tell me like, oh, you should do ASMR videos. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know about ASMR. Anyway, all right. Let's get to this before we play some Final Fantasy. People asked for this. Here we go. Megadeth album tier. Gonna go through all the Megadeth albums now. We did Metallica last week. We're gonna do Megadeth this week. There's more studio albums. They didn't put out quite as many live albums. If there's any live albums here, I'm trying to look. I'll just skip those because those don't really matter all that much. Really should add an F tier here. This is like somebody else's template, so maybe I can just add I don't know if I can. Let's add a row below, and we'll call it F. Hey, what the heck? F, and we'll make it red. F. There we go. F tier. Okay. All right, so here we go. Megadeth album tier. Let's start with Rust in Peace. This one is obviously S+. If you had an S+ rating, like one of the best albums ever recorded is Rust in Peace. If you don't believe me, just go listen to it. Now I'm going to make a little statement here. The original recording is much better than the remaster. For whatever reason, Dave and company started putting out remasters of older albums, starting with Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. And that one needed a remaster, but Rust in Peace really did not, and the remaster, I think, is much worse than the original version. It's not bad, but it does not have the edge that the original version had. The original version just sounds better top to bottom. It's not as volume maximized, but who cares? I don't really care about that. I think the production sounds amazing. I think it was recorded in 1991 or 1990, so it has great production in general. Every song on the album is good, even like even like Dawn Patrol, which is like a little filler track, has like a cool mood to it. Some of the best guitar solos ever recorded. It's just going to be one of the best albums you've ever heard. Sorry, I got some allergies today. All right, let's move on. Okay, Euthanasia. I'm going to put this one as an A. So, Euthanasia was one of my favorite albums growing up. Now, are all the songs as good as Rust in Peace? Definitely not. But there's a ton of good songs on here. Great production. I think Dave Mustaine's vocals sound really good. Some of the best guitar tone that they've recorded is actually on Euthanasia. So I think it's got actually an A tier album. I think it's an A tier album. Next is Cryptic Writings. Now, Cryptic Writings to me was good when it came out, but on further listens, it's a C. Half the songs are really good. Half the songs are decent or okay. And then you have a couple mediocre tracks. There's an edge missing from this album. And compared to Metallica at the time, which is doing the load reload stuff, yeah, it's more metal. But it felt like a big step back. And the same producer for Cryptic Writings also did Risk, which we'll get to. And so Cryptic Writings ended up, to me, being a little bit overrated. And I have this gray version. I have the silver version of the album, which was like a limited edition. I bought it when it came out. It has some cool songs like Use the Man and stuff, but in general, it's one of those average albums. Megadeth has done some average albums, and so this is kind of where that one is. Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. I'm actually going to put this one up at a B. Now, there's really good songs on here. There's mechanics. There's a whole bunch of good stuff. It is a very historic album, but it suffers from a bunch of things that stop it from being a really great listen, 30, 40 years later. And 40 years later, whoa, we're approaching 40 years. That's crazy to think about. Anyway, so Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. It's a good album to listen to. It's kind of like De Mysteriis Domus Sathanis in that it's a very historic album. It influenced lots of people, but it's not that great to listen to just on its own. The remaster is very much better than the original version. Everything's a lot clearer. louder. It just sounds much better. I had the original version like back in high school, and the remaster sounds just better top to bottom. Although I kind of like the original cover art, which is just a picture of like the Vic skull. But anyway, it still is not very well produced. The performances are off. There's timing issues with the band because they recorded it quickly and on a budget, I assume. Dave Mustaine, it's probably his worst vocal performance. He hadn't really figured it all out yet, but there's a raw energy in there that's really exciting. Kind of like Kill 'Em All by Metallica. The energy of it kind of makes up for otherwise its shortcomings. Now, this one may divide some fans, but I'm putting this one actually up at an A, which is so far so good, so what. This was one, basically, you had Gar Samuelson and Chris Poland got kicked out of the band. Either left or got kicked out. I think Gar got kicked out because he was addicted to heroin and was like selling pieces of his drum set. And he just couldn't operate in the band, so Dave fired him. And Chris Poland, I think, also got fired. I don't remember if he got fired or like they had an argument and he left. And so he was replaced by Chris. Oh man, what's his last name? He was replaced by the guitar tech, like while they were on tour. And so they finished that off. And Chuck Beeler. Chuck Beeler is who replaced him. And so, but he sounds good. He sounds really good on the album. The lead guitar sounds really good. This has a return. This has like a really raw 80s energy to it. And the question is whether this is like whether this is the best album of the 80s or if it's, Peace Sells. But it's actually a really good album. And it's an album that just bangs on top to bottom. Like you can begin the album and end the album. Every song just is an attack. You start with an instrumental track called Set the World on Fire that's just like vicious guitar soloing and it just has a great feel to it. It feels very late 80s thrashed in a way that a lot of albums are missing. While other bands were trying to like refine, like Metallica produced And Justice for All, which is a very refined album. This one is a very energetic and intense album, and I like it for that reason. So now, Countdown to Extinction. This one is, for my personal taste, I'm going to put it here. It's still an A. Maybe it's here. Almost a B. No, it's an A. The reason it's not S, some people put it S. It has some of their best songs on it. It has some great radio tracks. But they're just not as good as So Far So Good So What. On a track-by-track basis, they're not nearly as good as Rest in Peace. It's a step back from Rest in Peace. It's a more pop-oriented sound. There are some good songs in there, and then there's some that are just forgettable, kind of like Black Album. There's just a couple of tracks on there that you're like, or you listen to the album again, you're like, oh yeah, I remember this song, but you just didn't pay that much attention to it. But I will say that Marty Friedman's solo work on this album is fantastic. Obviously, Marty Friedman is like a perfect addition to the band for Rest in Peace. That's the first album he performed on. But Countdown to Extinction was just flat out one of the best guitar-oriented albums that Marty Friedman was on. His solos are just fantastic. So much variety, so much to listen to just for the lead guitar. And one of the things I love about these Megadeth albums is that if you open up the little booklet, you can see the solos listed. It'll say solo Mustaine, solo Friedman, or even solo. Who am I thinking of? The other Dave in the band. So it'll tell you what solo, like bass solo is there, like in what order. So you have an idea of what each guitar player sounds like. This was really useful to me when I was like growing up, because I would listen to it and be like, okay, that's what Dave Mustaine, and you get this kind of feel of what, like the guitar player's voice as you're going through it. Next one. Now this one was really big when it came out. This one is The World Needs a Hero. We really liked it when it came out. It had Return to Hangar 18. It was like a return to metal. I think Marty Friedman had left the band at this point. And I'm trying to remember who replaced him. It was good, though. Paul Di'Anno? yeah, anyway, it was a good album. It had some good songs on it, but going back and listening to it today, it's almost a D. Like, it almost is a D. And that's because, like, there's just some really cheesy tracks. It feels very rushed. It feels very phoned in. Like, the tracks just, it doesn't feel like they were feeling it at all. They just, it kind of felt like they were just assembling different songs based on their back catalog. They're like, oh, people like this, so let's just make another song that sounds like that. It's not a terrible album, but it's definitely low average now that I've gone back to it. Let's see here. United Abominations. This album, it's a B. It has some great songs on it, like Years of War. It's a good album, but it's one of those albums that, like, none of the songs made it onto the radio. But I still think it's a pretty good album to listen to. It has a lot of great work on it. It has great solo work on it. I think I think Glenn Drover is on the album, and Sean Drover, his brother. So brothers, they had a band called Eidolon. Of course, Glenn Drover played for King Diamond. And some other bands too. Glenn Drover's a very talented guitarist. Sean Drover's a very talented drummer. I think it really helped the band with the sound. So it's a great sound, but none of those like standout radio play tracks like you had on these earlier albums. And by this time, the entire radio complex was just ignoring Megadeth, but they're still selling gold albums easily because they have a great fan base. And it's a good album. It feels like a band again. When we get to, what is it? The System Has Failed. I'll talk about that one a little bit. Now, Super Collider, this is one of the ones that I'm like, I really want to put it at an F. I think it's their worst album by far. By far. It's their worst album. And it might be a D. It might be a D. But I feel like it's an F. Trying to go back and listen to it not that long ago. There's no good songs on it. There's not a single good song. So that to me says it's got to be like F. It's got to be bottom tier. There are individual good moments. There's individual good riffs. The performances aren't bad. You know, they're not bad performances. After this, you had Sean Drover leave and you had Chris Broderick leave the band. It felt very phoned in. It felt like something they recorded just to have an album that they could put out. It's really bad. It's the main thing I could say. It's not like it's weird because it's like Saint Anger is worse because you start comparing to other bands. Like other bands have done worse albums than Super Collider. Super Collider's big offense is that it's simply very, very boring. Nothing on it sounds interesting. It sounds like a bunch of gray goop. But it's not like entirely offensive. There's not like a bad production vibe to it or something like that. It's just a bunch of bad songs. Like the songs aren't good. So I'm going to put it as their F tier album. 13, this is a D album to me. 13 was a big disappointment. And what it sounded like, and I gather this is what it is, it was a bunch of old riffs that basically Dave Mustaine assembled into songs and made an album out of. Like he just like assembled it on Pro Tools or Cubase or whatever he uses. And one of the things that you pick up from that, you look at the album credits, and Marty Friedman is listed as a co-writer in a bunch of songs. You're like, did they hang out and like did he write more songs with the band? And the answer was no. Dave Mustaine was just using old unused riffs from when he was in the band. So that kind of lets you know what the album's about, and that it really is just a bunch of stuff that wasn't good enough for other albums, and it sounds like that. It's again, the big offense for 13 is that it's just very boring. There's just not a lot of interest to it. Even the solos sound off, as they sound off in like Super Collider. They're just not very good. And it's disappointing considering what came right before it, which was Endgame. Endgame is a very good album. So 13 was just a disappointment. You could say it's a low C. It kind of feels kind of average. So I'm actually going to, I don't know if I want to put it at a D or like a low C. I'm going to put it at a low C for now because it's just not very good. It's not a terrible album. It's not like terribly executed. It's just very boring. But these are definitely a tier above. It's going into D. All right, In Game. I'm sorry, no. The System Has Failed. This is another B album. System Has Failed is actually a really good album. I really enjoyed it when it came out. I gave it a listen not that long ago, and it really holds up. It's basically a Dave Mustaine album, though. It's not... It's a Megadeth album because it's Dave Mustaine, but it's Dave Mustaine. I think who's playing on it? Is it Vinny Colaiuta? I think Vinny Colaiuta's playing drums. So he has like a bunch of studio cats in just like playing bang good metal on here. In fact, I think it's better than United Abominations. They're playing really good. So the musicianship is absolutely top tier. You have Chris Poland come in to do solos. People were really hoping he would rejoin the band. He didn't rejoin the band. But it's a really very well executed album. You have some great standout tracks like Kick the Chair. It just kicks your butt from top to bottom. It's one of those albums that you put in and it's it's kind of like a Carcass album. It just starts up and just goes and goes until it ends. It's a really good album in that case. I mean, I'm tempted to even put it into A tier, even though I feel like it's a strong B though. Like these are almost A tier, but they're just kind of held back. And I think the only thing that holds it back is just there's a couple tracks that aren't that memorable. That's all. I feel like to be an A album, you got to have every track be good, and to be S, it's like every track has to not just be good, but the album as a whole has to be better than anything else. All right, In Game. This to me is actually an S tier album. This was Chris Broderick joined the band. You had who was playing bass? The guy from White Lion. Who am I thinking of? Before David rejoined the band. His name's slipping my mind. But anyway, In Game. Maybe it's high A. We'll put it high A. It's really good. I think it's one of their best albums. Every track is really good. The solos are great. Every track is worth listening to. We were wanting to learn the guitar parts from it. Chris Broderick sounded amazing. It definitely was a showcase of like some great talent in the band. It was a really good lineup. So I don't know. It's either probably we'll put it at high A. Dystopia. Dystopia is A. This one has Kiko on it, Kiko Loureiro, and he sounds amazing. I think kind of like Marty Friedman, he has such a different style from Dave Mustaine, it really complements it. Whereas Chris Broderick's kind of a chameleon. He kind of can just sound like other players, and that's really cool. But he doesn't have his own voice the way Kiko does. And so having Kiko in the band, I think, really elevated the sound. You also have, I'm trying to remember who played drums on this album. I think it was the drummer from Lamb of God. Anyway, he does a great job on the album, and in general, it's an excellent album. Pretty much every track is good. I've enjoyed listening to it front to back a bunch of times. So yeah, I really enjoyed this album. I don't know. I think it's maybe here though for me. Maybe actually here. It's really good though. It's definitely A. It's definitely like an A tier album. You know. Let's see here. Risk. Risk is very underrated. I'm going to say Risk is actually better than The World Needs a Hero. Risk is one of the most underrated albums of all time. It's maybe even a B, but I'm going to put it at C. I think I like it better than Cryptic Writings. It's not really a metal album. It's kind of like Load and Reload. It's much more rock oriented. Supposedly this is more of the stuff that Marty Friedman really wanted to do creatively was the stuff from Risk. And they took a risk. It's called Risk because they took a risk doing new stuff. There's actually a lot of good tracks, and the best tracks are actually like the non-metal tracks. There's two versions of the album you can listen to. There's the original version where the producer added a bunch of stuff, and then there's like a remix or remaster that Dave Mustaine did that took out all the stuff that the producer added on. I think it's really interesting to listen to both of them. I'm not sure which one's better. I actually would probably say that the remaster or remix, the version Dave Mustaine came out with later on is the better version of the album. I think the tracks just sound much better and cleaner without all the synthesizer and the extra instruments and crap that the producer threw on here. Same producer for these two albums. I don't think he fit Megadeth's sound well, but it's actually a very underrated album. If you go back and listen to it, there's a lot of good stuff. Kind of like Load and Reload, there's actually a lot of good material on there, including tracks that people hated, like Breadline, which are actually really good rock tracks. They're just not, they don't sound like Megadeth, and that's I think the problem that fans had with it. And it's not invalid. Like if you picked up a Motorhead album and it was like soft rock, you'd be a little bit upset. But just objectively speaking, I think it's actually a good album. So far, so good. So what? Peace sells, but who's buying? S tier album. We'll just put it there. It's not as good as Rust in Peace, but it's very good. This was actually the first Megadeth album I bought, and I bought it mostly because I was like, I want to get a Megadeth album. I don't know which one to get. This cover looks cool, and this album was like blew my mind. Now there's a remix edition. I think the remix edition or the remaster edition actually sounds really good, but I have an attachment to the original production, probably just an emotional attachment. I think the remastered production is better. It's just a clear album. It's louder. It's more intense. It has a better modern feeling to it. So you could listen to both and compare them, but I think the remaster is probably the better one to go with there. But I am attached to the original production quite a bit. It had that scooped mid sound from the 80s. So did Rust in Peace. I just love that guitar sound. The bass sounds great on this album. It's just a really, really good album in general. Every single song is good. Dave Mustaine's vocal performance is actually really good on it. It's better than it is in So Far, So Good, So What, but it still has this intense edge. If you like the vocal performances of the more radio-friendly, Countdown to Extinction, you're probably going to like Peace Sells, but Who's Buying? So yeah, David Ellefson on here sounds really, really good. I think it's one of his best performances, actually. There's a lot of great bass work on this album that I just really enjoyed. So anyway, there's your Megadeth tier list. Now, if we were going to compare this to the Metallica one, you'd see Metallica has another S tier album. Megadeth has way more A tier. Like their consistency is way higher. They really only have one album that I would consider just like no good songs on it. That was Super Collider. But all their other albums, there's generally, even Risk, their bad album from the 90s, is actually pretty decent if you give it a shot. Same thing with Load and Reload from Metallica. They're actually pretty decent albums. So anyway, there's your Megadeth spread. I really, in general, like this stuff. I had another one I pulled up here that was like the Megadeth, members. Maybe we'll do that another time, like the members of Megadeth. Here's Gar Samuelson. He's like amazing on Peace Sells, but then he's on heroin, so I don't know where to put him. Anyway, so that's that. The objective tier list for Megadeth. Leave me your thoughts. I don't know if you guys have any different thoughts about the Megadeth tier list. Anyway, so that's that. Let's go ahead and move on and maybe, play some games here. My hair's drying. Stripper tier list win or Striper tier list win. I'd have to listen. I haven't listened to every album. I think there's albums that I've missed along the way, so I'd have to go and listen to the couple that I missed. I could do an Iron Maiden one. Iron Maiden would actually be really good because, frankly, some people overrate some Iron Maiden albums, for being honest here. What are your thoughts on audiobooks? I don't put out a lot of them because they are not a big seller for what I do. I do have audiobooks available, and I put them up on the channel, and I sell them on Audible as well. I like listening to audiobooks. I tend to listen to more nonfiction with audiobooks than fiction. I tend to do it while I'm doing other chores, so it's just something to occupy my mind while I'm like cleaning up the garage or like mowing the lawn or something like that. So I really like audiobooks. I think they're great. Are they a substitute for reading a book? Not exactly, but they're close enough that it's going to be good. I think there's something to be gained from looking at the words on a page and actually seeing what's there on the page. So I feel like reading on the page is still superior, especially if you're a writer, to see things on the page. But I like audiobooks. It does take longer to get through an audiobook than to just read the book for me by a lot. So if I get a Wheel of Time book, I listen to some of the Wheel of Time books on audiobook, and they're 30 hours or something. That's a lot. That's a lot of hours. Where for me to just read the book is it's way less. It's a fraction of that time, tiny fraction of that time. Like 6 hours to read the book, and I'm going slow. And actually, I notice the worse the Robert Jordan book is, the faster I read it. Because there's so much crap, you just start skimming. You're like, oh, they're still talking, they're still talking, they're still talking, they're still talking, they're grimacing, pulling braids, they're still talking, something, okay, now I'll read closely because something is happening. Like, I remember the beginning of book 8 is 10,000 words of people standing on horses and looking at each other and saying things that aren't relevant to the plot. Like 10,000 words of people standing around. How did this get published? Like, if it's like an editor, if they handed this to me, it's like, what's the point of the scene, dude? You got to cut this down to like 1,000 words. Or just skip the whole passive exposition, indirect exposition, and just say what you want to say here. It was like, some people from Shinar, like standing on the edge of the borderlands or something, and just grimacing at each other for like 30 pages. It's awful. Judas Priest would be a great one too. Judas Priest, yeah. Seems like you read faster than I do. For example, Eyes on the Walls took me something like 8 hours. Oh, okay. I don't know how long the audiobook was. I don't think it was 8 hours. I think it was probably like 3 hours. You probably heard Symphony of Destruction a lot on the radio if you listen to it. Yeah. A lot of great radio tracks on Countdown to Extinction. It was number 2 behind Black Album, and that like upset Dave Mustaine. And I get it, I get why he was upset about that. All right, let's load up some Final Fantasy, and we'll play that for a bit. Now that we've done our tier maker assignments for the day. Get this hooked up. I do love the PlayStation Vita. It's such a cool device. So cool that I can do all this with it. I can even like stream it. Where am I? There it is. You can hear me going through my PS1 collection here. Here it is. All right. Let's get some audio for you guys, okay? Do love that sound. Here we go. There we go. All right. I'm gonna turn off this light. It's a little too bright. There we go. All right. I'm actually going to load up a save state. Where is it? We were in the desert. That's where I was going. Trying to get through the shifting sands of the desert. Is there any chance of you ranking some Elvis albums? I mean, he kind of predates the album paradigm. So he, I don't know. I like Elvis, but I'm not an expert on Elvis or anything either, so have to kind of figure out where this, like what direction the sand is going in. I'm reading Malazan at the moment. It's great. I like Malazan Book of the Fallen too. Great characters. I think what holds it together is like the characters are so good. If the characters weren't as good, Malazan would not be a very interesting book. It's way too slow. But the variety of characters and how quickly and well they're drawn and the variety of locations, I think it's way superior to Wheel of Time. Like if you're comparing contemporary fantasy and you're like, Malazan Book of the Fallen or Wheel of Time, it's like, dude, there's no contest. Malazan is so much better. In fact, it's like, I find I can't get through Wheel of Time. I find it too cringy. I'm like, try Malazan if you want more of that contemporary fantasy. It's very indirect exposition, though. So keep that in mind. Is that like, you might end up kind of confused as to what the heck is going on for a while. And that's normal. Because they don't really explain anything for you. Yeah, Elvis is really still in the 45 era. So, like, Elvis albums aren't really a thing till the 60s. The first big band that was like an album band was actually the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. Before the 60s, we didn't really have a lot of albums per se. Even jazz, buying a jazz LP was kind of like a rare thing. So LPs weren't nearly as big until the 60s. The 60s was when people started to really buy LPs. Here, I'm just going to save real quick. Yeah, Malazan's way superior to Wheel of Time. In fact, I can't think of really any other... I can't think of any other big, epic contemporary fantasy that I actually think is consistently really good or even worth reading. Whether it's people like Brandon Sanderson, who finished Wheel of Time, and his Wheel of Time books are pretty good, but like most of his trilogies just fall apart in the second book and then just get really boring. Where are we? Do you think this is the town of ruin Sid talked about? I wonder if there's some monsters in here. Let's check this building out. It looks pretty cool. I like the aesthetics in here. I want to use Malazan as my standard for writing, but I'm finding it different to get into it. Yeah, difficult to get into it. It's not for everyone. Dan Simmons' Hyperion books. Yeah, Hyperion is good. I don't know if I'd call them masterpieces, but they're good. They're definitely worth reading. I haven't reread them, so that's different from the Dune books, Even the Dune books, like the first Dune book is a masterpiece, and then pretty much the entire rest of the series, I think you can take it or leave it. What's that? Someone's running away over there. Who was that? King Tycoon? Did he go in? There he is. Yeah, the Hyperion books are good. Hyperion, Fall of Hyperion, and Endymion. Or Rise of Endymion. So I do recommend those. I think they are worth reading. They're good sci-fi books. If you like contemporary sci-fi especially. Alright, he's leading us here. There he is. Father! Papa! Uh-oh, he's turned into a bad guy. Yeah, Final Fantasy V is a good transition between 4 and 6. I love the environments. I feel like the environments are just so well drawn in this. The sprites are a little small still, but they actually do a lot with the little sprites. They look cute. They look cool. Way better than the mobile version. Reina. So you really are my sister. I should have admitted it sooner. Forgive me. How sweet. Sister. Reina. But yeah, the walls... I have a CRT filter on this, so this is way closer to what it looked like back in the 90s. Where, like, you don't see these raw pixels around, like, the O, for instance. Everything was a lot softer on a CRT. It just looks so much better. Like, the Super Nintendo era games just looked so much better back in the day. They're never... Like, you could play them on your Switch, but they don't look right. They're not going to look good unless you put them in a CRT. Then they look good. Now, where are we? What a strange place. Where's Galoof? Hey, that's right. We must have gotten separated when we fell down that hole. I'm sure he's okay. That's one tough old cuss. We'll probably find him later. Let's go on. How should I go about using Malazan's magic as a basis for my own? Mr. Erickson unfortunately doesn't have any posts on the topic. I wouldn't use it as a basis. You got to think about how you want magic to be. I'm not big into magic systems. Like, if you highly systematize it, it just becomes boring Brandon Sanderson fake science. It just gets old, man. It's like we're going to look back on it as like a weird relic of the aughts and the teens. Like, all these books had like RPG magic systems. Just, it's, you know, people, I don't like lit RPG stuff. And like, that's a lit RPG element. It's bringing a gaming element into the book and talking about it a lot. It's not really magic. It'd be better if you change the way you approach magic in your story in general. Galoof. What does he say? Wait a darn minute. You just gonna leave me? Sorry. Alright. See if there's any like secret passages here. Well, I like this music. Cool music here. Little plate on the floor. These cool statues. Turn that up a little bit. You know any good zombie books? I like Cell by Stephen King, which is a weird kind of a zombie book, but it's actually good. I like World War Z. The audiobook for World War Z is actually pretty cool because the way they do it, it's kind of like a fake history. Been reading Lord of the Rings since Christmas, having just now gotten to Two Towers. What's a good series to read after Lord of the Rings? Should I consider reading something other than fantasy after Lord of the Rings? I'd say read Elric to get the other side, to get the pulp side. You know, it's not really pulps, but you know, it's more derived from the pulp. So Robert E. Howard, Conan stuff, or read Michael Moorcock, the Elric series. Both of those are really good. They're very big contrasts to Lord of the Rings, so it'll give you like a good balance there. What are your thoughts on the way Jules Verne described the science behind everything in detail? He thought H.G. Wells wasn't real science fiction because he didn't stick to hard science. I think that's apocryphal. I think that's kind of the feeling of science fiction that emerged in the 40s that tried to trash like planetary romance and stuff. I think that's all artificial. The entire genre of science fiction makes no sense. I'm going to link you something. All right. Just give me a second. I'm going to link you something. See if I can find it. Science fiction doesn't exist. There's no such thing as science fiction, guys. It's a genre which describes nothing. So you can read J.D. Cowan's blog post on this. It's very good. Okay. The idea of science fiction being stories about science makes no sense when you look into it. Right? They're both describing things that don't exist. Like, there's no difference between science fiction and fantasy, and even fantasy doesn't describe anything. We're just really getting back into just adventure novels, okay? All right, here we go. Okay, let's go back to this. Anyway, so you got that. Here we go. What in... Other good suggestions. There's so much good fantasy that's out there. That's not Lord of the Rings. You can check out stuff by Poul Anderson, like The High Crusade. It's a pretty fun book. Basically, Crusaders get into a spaceship. Pretty cool stuff. Whoa, look at this. Yeah, this is very Final Fantasy VI. I love it. Whoa! Everything's blowing up. Meanwhile... Here comes our black chocobo friend. Oh, he flew back there? Black chocobo. Oh, you guys took him. Let's return him to the woods. Right, at least we kept our promise to Jojo. My black chocobo! Whew, that was close. Must have been some kind of warp apparatus. After just sitting there all that time, it must have just broke when we tried to use it. Can't go that way. Alright, here we go. No monsters yet. Kinda interesting. This is pretty. Push the switch. No. Let's look around the room first before we push the switch. Maybe we can just see something in here. Oh. Rest up a bit. Yes. Yes, I shall rest up a bit. Byrne did try to make his book scientifically accurate. Well, you're still being speculative. That's the thing about scientific accuracy. Makes no sense when you're being speculative about science in general. But yeah, the entire genre is like a made-up thing. And doesn't really make a lot of sense. Uh-oh. Whoa. Where'd they go? Makes some pretty good fantasy books. Also, Vox Day's Throne of Bones and Sea of Skulls are good. I haven't read the second one. I just read the first one. Throne of Bones. It's good. I mean, my only criticism is that I feel like there's a little too much story for one book, in that, like, there's kind of so many different threads, and there's so much switching around that, you know, if you're not reading it pretty consistently, which I didn't, you know, I would read some here and there, and then you're like, wait, where am I? Who are these guys? There's a lot going on in it, but I enjoyed it. I really, I think Vox Day writes great prose and dialogue and good characters. I loved the kind of Romans fighting the goblins. I think that was a fun thing. Different parts or different, I guess, areas of this fantasy world are based on kind of extrapolations or broad strokes of different, historical kind of empires or countries or ways of doing things. I really like that. Jojo, hey, the fire ship. Wasn't it supposed to be sunk? So what's that ship way over there? So there's a fire ship here. Alright, so it's here. I don't think we need to explore it, really. Coca-Cola nonsense, boycotting. I don't care about that. Dude, I just don't pay attention. They, like, Coca-Cola, I mean, every corporation does the virtue signaling, because if they don't, then they get attacked. It's not, at this point, it's no longer a virtue signal. It's just affirming, it's like saying that Stalin is good. It's saying Heil Hitler is what it's saying. Pride Month is basically everybody doing their obligatory Heils to the ruling regime. And if you don't do it, you're gonna get a wary eye cast upon you. A ship with a propeller. Now this is just plain weird. Hey guys. Fancy? What a coincidence. Youch! Now where are we? Jojo. Reyna, Ferris, and Galoof. How did you get here? We rode the Black Chocobo back to Crescent Island. Then all of a sudden, we fell down this huge hole. So, I guess that would put us under the island? That's why the fire ship's here. Looks like the place was built long ago. What's with this funny prop ship? Grandpa can explain better than me. Hey, where is he? I'm not sure what big men with screwdrivers means. I don't remember every little thing that Brian says, but chances are he's not BSing you. Right? I mean, I don't think any trope is inherently bad. It's all about how you use it. And so, like it's like the trope of like the evil priest. The evil priest, it's just like this gets a little old. It's a little too ham-fisted. It's like all the priests are evil. It's like, well, you can't have somebody in that profession that's good. It's like you clearly have a problem with religion, and it's showing, and it's making your story worse. Alright, I guess we'll go down here. Christopher Arrocio is a young author who's very intelligent and his books are well received. Yeah, I haven't read any yet. He has good covers. I'll say he's got great covers. Incredible. Hello? Who's at my door? Is there a baby? Daddy? What do you need? Oh, no, I'm in the middle of something, baby. It's okay. Ow.
I want to come in your office.
Yeah, you can come in my office. You want to say hi? Here you go. Say, hi, what do you got there? What's this?
I don't know.
Here's your doctor thing. Are you a doctor?
Huh.
You're going to listen to my heart? Here, you can listen to my heart. Okay, put that on.
Hey, Dad, your lava lamp looks purple when it's on the little thing.
And that's kind of pink normally, huh? My colors are slightly off, huh? Hey, can you hear Daddy's heart? Does it sound okay? Does it sound okay, Doctor?
Yes.
Yes, it sounds okay.
Mom.
There you are. Aren't you beautiful? Yes.
Can I turn in doctor?
You're the doctor. All right, guys. Let me finish this up.
Come on.
Go.
Let's go.
Go get Mom. Go get the mom.
Come on.
Oh,
Say bye, Daddy's friends. Okay, come on.
You silly girl. She's like, I'm not leaving Daddy's office.
I know. Daddy's working.
All right. You can see the physique. All right. Where were we? There we go. Just tighten this and move this. Did it. Did what? Yeah, Christopher posts a lot of stuff of him and his wife. It's good. It's like young married people. I like seeing that. It's wholesome. It's very wholesome to me. Whoa, here we go. Airship time. Say, Sid, what is this thing? Looks like an airship to me. Read about one once, but never dreamed they'd really existed. What's wrong with it? We're being dragged down by something. There's a monster stuck on the hull. Boss fight. All right. Clay Claw. I wonder what his weakness is. We can do a sleep sword. Let's do bolt. Try that. And then we'll do... Wait, we can do summon. I'll try Remora. See what that does. Nothing. Let's do haste on... We'll haste our sorcerer so he can do some insane damage right now. Oh, he one-shotted him. Well, that wasn't too hard. I was like, there's a boss fight. Not really. An ice bow. Cool. Oh, characters who are smarter than everyone have an answer for everything and fix all problems with science and logic instead of violence and action. I think you can have somebody who thinks like that, but they have to. There always has to be some failures of any character, otherwise they're not interesting. They just become a Mary Sue kind of character. Damage is minimal. We could fix it with pots from the fire ship. Sid. I'm sick of being thanked. We'll stay behind and search for the Earth crystal here. You search the skies. Get going. Why aren't painted movie posters a thing anymore? Those were awesome. So I've gone over this before, but the reason you don't see painted book covers and painted movie posters is a factor of two things. One is cost, and the second one really has to do with the self-reinforcing nature of advertising. So the reason that you shouldn't have an illustrated book cover is that illustrated book covers don't sell. And the reason illustrated book covers don't sell is because they weren't used. And they weren't used because most publishers were wanting to go with cheaper book covers. And Photoshop is cheaper. So it became a thing where, like, if you have an illustrated book cover, it looks like an old-timey book, or it doesn't look like it belongs in the genre. It doesn't look like a new modern book. Therefore, your consumer will assume it's not something that they want to read. They're looking for things which are similar to what is like the standard, not different from the standard. So standing out can be a bad thing. It's not always a bad thing, but it can be. So it's a self-reinforcing thing where people stopped using them because they were expensive. And then if you do use one, it's an even worse investment because it looks too different from everything else. That's kind of where we're at. Yar, the evil black mage, Exdeath. We must keep him from returning. All that's left is the Earth crystal. Here we go. What are we waiting for? Let's go. The deck of dragons in Malazan is... This looked better. I'm sure this looked better on Super Nintendo because the PlayStation can't really do Mode 7 graphics properly. So, I'm not sure where we go now. What time is it? It's 2. Should probably stop the stream soonish. I think I saw... Here, we can check here. I don't think I visited this village, so we'll stop here. One of Brian Niemeyer's complaints about John W. Campbell influenced science fiction is that it's an ode to rationalism with big man of screwdrivers who know and fix everything. Yeah, I agree with that. I'm just a humble shepherd. Should buy tonics, you know. Is there anything in here? Nope. It's just like a secret passage that gives you nothing. Okay. Alright. Welcome. That'll be 30 gold piece. Yeah, why not? I got a gold. I haven't played the game. Rimworld, no. Final Fantasy games seem to have mostly Western influences. Yeah, I mean, I think they were very influenced by Western fantasy because it's coming out of the West, but there's Eastern elements too, especially Final Fantasy X is very Eastern. Have you seen the big waterfall east of here? They're clearly called Easterly Falls. Pretty nice, huh? Alright, let's see what kind of armor we can get. Anything good? These are expensive. Dang. I don't have money for that. I think the angel ring reses you. I think after you die, the angel ring like brings you back. Fire rings absorb flames, protect against the cold, but are weak against water. Coral rings absorb water, protect against fire, but are weak against lightning. Angel rings protect against zombie and aging spells. Sorry for the sneezes, guys. Forgot to take an antihistamine. Allergies been bad lately. The last quake took out the road to the falls entirely. The frog's still sleeping even though it's warm out. Some sheep. You're a sheep hoarder. I found something cool in the flower bed over there. How can I find it? That's the real question. Because I would like something cool out of the flower bed. Is that you can never go home against sentiment really true? I don't know about that. I don't know. So, if you are in the fantasy genre, you can have a painted cover. That's the only genre you're allowed. Some science fiction books you can get away with a painted cover. But what tends to happen is that if it's not really a top-notch painting by an expert painter, it looks like a child's book. That's what ends up happening. It ends up coming off as a children's book unless it's an absolutely top-tier... if it's not absolutely top-tier art, don't even bother. And that's the problem with painted covers if you're an indie author, is that you're going to have to pay thousands of dollars for a good one. And then you have to sell thousands of books to make that up. Just to, like, pay for that. There's a monster wandering around the eastern woods dressed like an old man. He'll hit you like a thunderclap. You know, you can get artwork on the cheap, but if you want to have a custom painted cover done, it's going to cost you a crap ton of money. And you're going to have to sell a lot of books to make it up. That's why it's difficult to get a good painted cover. You know, I personally would much rather Photoshop a fantasy cover than have anything less than the absolute top standard for painted covers. You know, if you were to get... There's so many great artists, it's hard to describe them, but like the top guys are going to be guys like Howard Lyon that are still going to be somewhere in the affordable range. Or Karen Byatt, if you want the digital style, he did this cover. It's very difficult to get them. I wouldn't even use them unless they were absolutely top of the line, because they won't sell. It'll hurt your sales more than a Photoshop cover will. What is this? Oh, come on. They'll ram you as soon as they look at you. Bah. Tap, tap. Alright. Secret discovered. You're the ones trying to save the crystals? Yes. Then here's a song that should help you. Love song soothes the savage beast, and monsters like it too. Alright, so we got a bard song. But I'm probably not going to even use the bard class at all. It's my expectation. But I just won't use it. It's not a very good class. Something's hidden behind the waterfall. At least that's what Great Grandma said. Alright. I think I'm going to save here and probably call it because I got other stuff I need to do. Save our game. Do you think it would be fairly affordable to get a cover painting like the ones on the Brockstone books? I don't know. You have to look around, but... No, they're not bad. They look... They're really not bad. They're fine. I don't know. The thing about cover paintings is, like, I can smell a mile away if they're not absolutely top tier, and like most consumers can too, and they'll shy away from it. They'll think it's like a bad book because the cover's bad. That's reality. People judge a book by the cover. They really do. All right, so I'm going to. Yeah, I mean, I've thought about taking up painting just to get better covers. How do you twist the trope on its head? Also, what we were saying about the Deck of Dragons. Sorry, Deck of Dragons is this idea that it's Erickson's idea of divination, right? When you divine, you're trying to divine the will of the gods, but it's a weird reverse where the Deck of Dragons literally, the tool controls the destiny. So if you can alter the tool, then you are going to alter destiny. So rather than the divination being something you discover, it's something that you think you're discovering, but you're actually actively participating in it. Meaning, it's kind of this thing. It's kind of a theme between destiny and free will, that everybody's acting, trying to divine destiny, but it's really them acting upon it that is changing the way things are going. And that's important, is like the crippled god hires a guy to add a card to the Deck of Dragons, and when that card is in the Deck of Dragons, everybody's Deck of Dragons changes what's in it. So if somebody has a Deck of Dragons and they use it, all of a sudden there's a new card in it, and they're like, where did that come from? You know, so that stuff is all weird, but it's basically this relationship of destiny and free will, that you are actually acting on it. By acting on it, you're influencing destiny yourself. All right, thanks guys. I think I'm gonna call it there because we're now after 2:00. So I don't know about, I can't give you every little detail about like what it costs to get a painted cover. It's just illustrated covers. I'm not afraid to use them because I don't care that much about trying to fit into the market, like the mainstream market. The way mainstream marketing works. I tend to do alt marketing almost exclusively because it's more money efficient than doing all of the, I got to do some Amazon AdWords and I got to do this and that. I just don't want to bother with all that, and it's really hard to compete in that way. So I tend to go to alternative streams to get attention, in which case illustrated covers might work. If you're trying to attract an audience that wants old fiction, then that's going to be more attractive to them. But yeah, anyway, that's it. It starts to get unaffordable. Now, if you can find someone from the Eastern Bloc that will do a digital painting for you for like a couple $100, then you're good to go. So at some points you can get one pretty comparable, but my recommendation would be go on something like ArtStation or DeviantArt and just start looking through a bunch of people who have portfolios and start messaging them. How much would you charge for a custom cover that's like this image that you did? Maybe they have like a picture of Joan of Arc or something, and it's like, okay, I have a female character, maybe you could paint one in armor that's like this. How much would you charge for that? And then my recommendation is always, and I've actually rejected cover artists because they refused. They wanted to do the text, and I'm like, no, I will do the text. And there's many reasons for that. You're better off having even like a semi-proficient graphic designer do the text, because you can alter the text later. If your artist is often not up to snuff on book cover design. They're good on art, but they don't know like what fonts you should use. So I remember turning down an artist because he's like, writers don't know this. I'm like, I'm looking at your covers and they have bad fonts. So I'm not gonna. You have good art but bad fonts. I don't want your fonts. I just want your art, and then I will do all the design because that is what I am good at. But anyway. So there's that. Thanks so much, guys. I will see you all next time. Have a great day.